Now we come to the portion of the service before we get into our Bible study that we talk about some end times news, trends, and prophecy update as we do each week. This past week we launched our midweek update online, and that was kind of on Wednesday, Thursday time, and just a lot of cool, positive feedback. And you're able to cover a lot more ground because there's so many things going on. You can't fit it on, and it's not my goal to put as many things into a Sunday morning update. And so if I don't cover a lot of ground on a Sunday morning, a lot of things will be up on the midweek update. So here's some key points that are coming up in recent development that's going on. That as we know, there's an escalation that's going to be a war happening in the Middle East. There's technological things that are going on. For example, this article came out on Thursday out of the Jerusalem Post. The Israeli Defense Force like to call the cyberspace the most crowded playing field in the Middle East. So it's not just what's going on the ground, but it's on the internet and how their website servers have been hacked by other groups and other people overseas. And so the foreign reports attributed striking against the Syrian regime, the Israeli Defense Force, may rarely cause a military response, such as a barrage of rockets. However, certain results are a direct threat to Israel's security systems. So there's this infiltration, and it could be a preemptive strike sometimes, or they're making these false reports or something that happened, and whether they claim it's true or not, or accept it. And but you're starting to see there's this other weapon that countries are using, the internet. They're using other ways, the cyber attacks that can happen to wipe out systems, but also the threats that occur online. In the world today, there's 5 major cyber powers. Israel's one of them. Then you have the other 4 being U.S., Iran, Germany, and the UK. Last year, they had some other threats that went on. Even this past week, on Wednesday night, there was a publication of a further report of an attack on Israel, that there had been a raise of an alert for preparedness for Israel's defense force. And even if the army is not expecting to deal with a barrage of missiles, at least in the cyberspace, they're bracing for combat. As those who are looking for verification to make cyberspace one of the most fascinating areas in the world. So this is a whole new weaponry that countries are utilizing. Speaking of technology, Hezbollah, according to a report on Wednesday out of the Blaze, threatened to hit Israel with a low-tech weapon that will pack a punch of a nuclear bomb. So what their idea is, and what the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, has threatened to attack an ammonia storage facility north of Israel. So all they need to do is do kind of a weapon that kind of knocks out that, and it has enough to result in hundreds of thousands of fatalities in that particular region, like a nuclear bomb that would go off. And him addressing a particular group of people, he quotes and posted this on YNet News, and he says it's simple mathematics. A few missiles and ammonium plants equals the same amount of death as an atomic bomb. It almost sounds like Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. They're also on another report on Tuesday at the Jerusalem Post, and a lot of other countries are in the same ballgame with this, that Hezbollah is covertly watching Israel, waiting for the day of battle. So there's escalation. These countries around Israel are ready to attack, just as we've mentioned time and again with Ezekiel 38:39. Also, speaking of terrorist organizations, the countdown to the latest Iran missile test is underway, according to officials on Thursday. So Iran is preparing to conduct a ballistic missile test within the next 10 days, according to officials. And such a test would mark Tehran's latest violation of a UN resolution, where Tehran is not supposed to do any missile stuff within the next 8 years, according to the UN resolution 2231. It's not like Iran really cares what the world thinks. They're going to do whatever they want to do. They have an agenda for their nuclear bombs, which they already have. And but it's interesting that they're now going to probably pose another threat, kind of like what North Korea continues to do, launching these type of ballistic missiles. And just a matter of time before one lands in another country to cause a lot of damage. So they're very clever in finding ways to just continue to develop their program. Speaking of clever, this one was kind of interesting. This came out of the Telegraph on Thursday, how Sweden is turning their Caribbean cruise ships into housing for refugees. So the luxury cruise ship is now spending decades that has gone across the coast of the Mediterranean and the Caribbean, are now going to Sweden to where they're planning to convert these luxury cruise ships to these floating asylum centers. So it's pretty creative in what they're doing, and it's going to save them a lot of money than housing them in hotels or other places like that. For example, the cost per week may end up being about $700 per week when they get into this place. In November, some of the places that they're housing them was about $10,000 for November time during winter and things like that. So they're finding ways to find it more cost efficient to house these people, but you're still going to have the problems and issues that are going on in those countries. Also, another current problem, as we mentioned last week, we just got the breaking news that morning about the death of Supreme Court Justice Scalia. The more you look into it, the more fishier it gets. As you see, there's a huge cover-up going on of his death, or shall we say murder. You see the agenda behind the Obama administration. You see the timeliness of how everything's coming up and how they kind of went about the whole taking care of the body. And there's a whole cover-up going on, without getting into all the implications of it. But you see the timing. You see Obama's last year in office. He was kind of like the real last conservative justice on the bench. You see the presidential elections, steaming up to a whole nother level. The agenda to destroy America, it's escalating, and having him removed is going to, because he was a proponent of the Second Amendment and was for it. And now when you remove someone off that, you can see that it's going to be a whole constitutional change. But also you see with Obama, he's going to put another liberal judge on there. He's already appointed 2 other people on there. And you see the way things have turned around the last 7 years that he's been in office. And so it's interesting to see more that you look into some of these reports, the more you see the cover-up, the agenda of the elite. And they're panicking to push their agenda. And how they do this. Another side issue, it was interesting to hear this, that Caitlyn Jenner said that he catches more attack, more hell for his conservative views than being a transgender. He was speaking at a University of Pennsylvania on Wednesday, and he said he's constantly being criticized for his conservative views rather than him being transgender. He had a upbringing as a Christian, so he has that, but he's still conservative in his values versus, again, I don't know why he went transgender, but he said he's gotten more flack for being a conservative Republican than for being trans. And when asked a student why he wasn't a Democrat, and there's all kinds of reasons why, because, and again, besides the transgender issue, being a Democrat, again, it goes against what the Bible says, the policies, the procedures for homosexuality and sodomy, the killing of abortions. This is what the Democrats are for. That goes clearly against what the Scripture's for. And there's a lot of other things that we can unpack on the whole thing, not to make it a political issue. But there's a lot of things that he said that have changed for Jenner in the last year, but his political affiliation is not one of them. So he's still conservative, which is still interesting in spite of living this sort of lifestyle. On a similar issue here in Victoria, there was a report that came out to recognize relationships of same-sex couple who marry overseas. So this is just going to continue to snowball here in Australia, even though it's not legal for same-sex marriage yet. Probably this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Australia passes a bill to recognize it. But here in Victoria, they're recognizing these type of relationships. On a final 2 issues, on a kind of more of an economic issue. Interesting that this came out of the LibertyBlitzkrieg.com, that the latest version of Monopoly is called Ultimate Banking is completely cashless. So they're trying to get people more and more used to this whole cashless society. Again, the war on cash has been in the works for many years. And within the next 6 years here in Australia, it's going to go cashless. They're making that trends, and you see a lot of other countries in Europe going the same direction. And then lastly, Henry Kissinger the other week went to Moscow to discuss the new financial system to Putin. So you know that there's a whole agenda coming up with the economics. There's going to be a crash coming up. So we say, hey, be prepared, be ready. We see the stock markets continue to crash. And then they're, of course, going to do away with the cash, to have a cashless society. So signs of the times, more and more each week, things are happening, more and more wars and development of wars and rumors of wars, the threats, the immorality, the economic issues are continue to develop. So things to keep posted on, and that is it for today's update.